Okay. Hello, everybody. Just giving everyone a few minutes before we get started, just for everybody to join in. It won't be much longer. Grab some lunch, grab a drink, get settled. Just give it one more minute and then we'll kick off. Okay, a few more joining. All right, I think we can get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today for this wonderful event, which is hosted by Academy XI in partnership with Generation Australia and MYOB. I'd first like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. My name is Christie Whitehill and I am the founder of Tech Ready Women. I'll be moderating the panel today, but before we kick off, I'd first like to introduce Erin Lutley, who is the Head of Partnerships of Academy XI, just to say a few words.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming. I'll be fairly quick. I just thought it would be helpful to tell you a little bit about who Academy XI are and why this subject is important to us. Marina, are you able to stop the screen share? Great, thank you. So if you haven't heard of us before, we're a school for emerging disciplines. What that really means is digital, data, and design. We have two sides to the business. One is we teach individuals, so it's a lot of people chasing their dream jobs in digital. And then I actually head up the team training side of the organization. So also a lot of the time helping people chase their dream jobs in digital, but just in a different context. So we see a lot of people who have that digital imposter syndrome, or they just don't think it's possible to go into these spaces. And we're all about trying to create those pathways on both sides of the organization. So that's why this subject, and particularly for women breaking into digital, there are barriers, and we are passionate about breaking those down. And that's why I'm here today, along with a whole bunch of people who have more reason to be here than me. So I'm going to pass it back off very quickly. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. And just a little bit of housekeeping, everyone. We are going to be kicking off this panel for around 30 to 40 minutes, having a great discussion, and we're going to have around 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So make sure you write down all your questions, and we'll be able to pop those in the chat box towards the end, or even if they pop up in your mind like throughout the chat, definitely write it down and we will get to those towards the end. But today's discussion is in celebration of International Women's Week, and the topic we have today is Women in Tech, why aren't there more of us? And as a woman who's been in the industry for over 10 years, I've not only personally experienced some of the barriers, but I've also had many conversations around this topic, and I've personally wondered this question myself. So for today's panel, we have four special guests who can share their own personal insights into the solutions that can be offered in increasing more women into tech roles. So today I will introduce our four panelists. So we have Erin Brindley, who is the National Partnerships Manager of Generation Australia. As Generation's National Partnerships Programs Manager, Erin is responsible for Generation's operations and leading the programs team in recruitment and selection of students, program delivery, mentorship and alumni. We also have Chanh, Kien, sorry if I haven't said your last name right. She's the program advisor for MYOB's graduate program, the Future Makers Academy and Developer program. With 13 years of digital and tech recruitment experience, Chanh has co-developed MYOB's graduate program, the Future Makers Academy, and its diversity program, Develop Her. Chanh is a genuine passion for growth and development in people, as well as diversity in all dimensions. She's a co-author of a children's book, Confident Coco, that focuses on teaching children the power of confidence through simple storytelling and featuring an Asian lead character to increase diverse representation in children's literature. Sounds pretty awesome. Welcome, Chanh. Eric Lutley, who you have just met, has spent most of his career on the commercial side of digital and design agencies, with some software development thrown in for good measure. These days, he co-designs training programs with XI's corporate and government clients, and he can talk endlessly about human-centered design and digital transformation, and will do so if you're not careful. We'll watch you through this convo. Michelle Wong is Protege developer at MYOB. Michelle graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, Chinese Language and History, and Masters in Teaching Primary from the University of Melbourne. She has worked as a primary school teacher for over 6 years in a variety of public, private and remote school environments, and she is a recipient of MYOB's Developer Scholarship Program and is currently a Protege developer at MYOB. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. I actually wanted to kick off today's discussion with Michelle. Now, you've made the transition from primary school teacher to developer. What made you want to step into a tech role?
Good question, Christie. So I think there's actually probably two significant parts to my journey. Firstly, one is to do with coding in a primary school environment, and the other is to do with, I guess, how my learning progressed my own self as an individual. So firstly, in relation to coding in a primary school environment. So right now, as Christie mentioned, I'm a junior developer or protege developer at MYOB. But how did I actually end up here? I can honestly say it is partly due to my students. So growing up, I actually never wrote a single line of code at any of the schools or universities I attended. So it was actually only after becoming a teacher and seeing the benefits of using tech as an engaging tool for learning that I started to realise how powerful tech can be. I implemented blogs, video conferences between like an Australian school I was working at and an American organisation. And then I also finally implemented a variety of code clubs in the schools that I worked at. So I was really lucky at the time that my principal gave me pretty much free rein to do things like this. So I specifically used the program Scratch, which was developed by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to teach children to code. And it's also the program that I used to write my first line of code. Although I think probably writing my first line of code is probably a bit loose, because Scratch, I guess for those who don't know, is actually literally just dragging and dropping blocks of code. So it's not, there's no writing involved. So yeah, so this was all in 2015. So as I was implementing all these clubs, I guess I started to realize that I had to really just stay one step ahead of my students. My students were in fact so good at coding. I remember one student who told me after only a few coding sessions, he said to me, "I tried coding on the weekend, Miss Wong." So clearly they loved coding and they were doing it in their spare time. And so I think my students' love and enthusiasm for coding really helped to fuel my own love and passion of coding. So this all led me to dabble in coding during my spare time, just so that I could stay one step ahead of my students. So I would run these same sessions with my students. For example, like I would learn about, say, variables or if-else statements, and then I would then teach my students this the following week. I was actually barely keeping up with my students, to be honest. And my students made really cool games in Scratch, including things like mazes, quizzes related to maths, and one student even made a game related to picking up rubbish to encourage other students in the school to pick up rubbish as well. So this really inspired me to keep at coding. And I guess this brings me to the next part of the journey, which is related to how my learning in coding then progressed. So I didn't just stay with Scratch all this time. Over the next 6 months in 2019, whilst I was still working full-time as a teacher, I guess my self-paced learning really picked up the pace. I began coding a bit more seriously with real code. So I use HTML and CSS. I know some people maybe don't consider that to be real code, but for me at the time, that definitely was. So my first website was actually made following an 11-minute YouTube video, and it was pretty hideous. Like think Times New Roman against a bright green background. So yeah, design was really not my forte. Anyway, during this time, I also used some great websites like Free Code Camp and Udemy, and I listened to a variety of coding podcasts. So sometimes in these coding podcasts, I'll understand the content, but other times it was a bit beyond me. I remember listening for ages to people who were talking about Docker and Kubernetes. And at the time, I was just thinking, what on earth is this? So during this time in 2019, I also joined a plethora of coding meetups. I found out about free coding workshops, and these workshops kind of had a domino effect. People I met from these workshops would then tell me about other coding workshops, and pretty soon I was spoilt with so many different opportunities to code. So thinking back, I think this was actually probably this time in 2019 was a really good litmus test for me to see whether or not coding was actually for me. And after undertaking all these coding activities, I still wasn't bored. So that was a really good sign for me. And I think the real turning point came in my journey when I went to a workshop. It was the Muses JavaScript workshop, which was a workshop catered for people who identified as female to participate in activity in some learning about JavaScript. And I met someone who actually told me about MYOB's Develop Her program, which is a program designed for women to become software developers. And this program would essentially cover tuition fees to study at a coding bootcamp, and also then guarantee a graduate position at MYOB upon completion. So it seemed too good to be true. And so anyway, I applied, and I guess the rest is history. So so I suppose in a nutshell, I came into tech by becoming really passionate about teaching coding with my students, and then the right opportunity seemed to come my way.
Yeah. It sounds like a great journey, and obviously starting with something that you really cared about and then being able to enter into the career and progressing further. And I mean, I'm really keen to know from Chanh, like, are there more women like Michelle? And do women actually want to take up coding and become software engineers? Like, what have you seen based on your own experience?
Well, so currently in our Future Makers Academy, we have, so our graduates consist of 60% of women in our population, which then, acts as a funnel towards the rest of the organisation, which is pretty awesome. To the question around, do women actually want to code? I think that is a very interesting question, because I think I would say the other question to turn over is, do women know the opportunities of coding, and what does it actually involve? I think, at a very young age, when we grow up, and I think I love the fact that Michelle, had something to do with this, in that enabling, your future generations to understand what technology looks like. And in my generation, technology was just not kind of a concept that was really being given. It was probably more explored within the male population, but it just didn't seem to be a possibility, because through technology, through coding, through even the workforce of technology, I wasn't really educated in that. And I don't believe that there's a lot of women that are aware that there is a lot of creativity, that solving problems is one factor of it, but there's this capability of bringing synergy in what you're building to the people that you are engaging with. So I think the question is that, I would say that the more that we educate our future generations, or even women today, about the opportunities of technology, the more there will be interest. So I think that's probably the angle that I would go in. And I'm sorry if that doesn't really respond to the question, as you said, but I would say it's just more so the education part that needs to be delivered a little bit further.
Go for it.
There you go.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think I wanted to bring in Erin on this point, in terms of your experience as well, because, do you feel that the traditional entry methods to the industry are actually supportive of women, and what barriers have you seen? Just on to Chan's point too.
Yeah, and Chanh, I've had a very similar personal experience as well in terms of tech. I never considered it. Coding was not taught when I was at school, and I'm not yet 30, so that's hopefully not that long ago. And I found myself in a non-tech role within the tech field when in my last role at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and now getting to work for an organization that is aiming to get more women and diverse people of diverse backgrounds in the industry. I'm starting to understand some of the real barriers to that. I think in order for, I think we can agree that the vast majority of employers out there have the right intentions. They would like to see a more diverse workforce, not just women, but women of color, women of diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds, people with disability, LGBTQI plus folk. I think that is definitely something that people are interested in, but that interest is not necessarily followed up with the action that needs to take place in the hiring process. So going beyond, you know, these people are encouraged to apply, and actually considering different ways of attracting candidates to your organization. For example, with our generation graduates, we've done testing with them, and they're at a university level in junior web development, having done a 12-week boot camp. And there's still a sense in the industry that you need that university degree in order to enter the field. And people often talk about the leaky pipeline within the STEM field for women. So that's the idea that there are lots of little things along the way, from childhood through education through to the time that they want to enter the field, that sees women drop out for various numbers of reasons. And so by the time you come to the point where you're maybe looking for people through a graduate program, you're not going to see the same number of qualified women. And so you need to widen your scope. Think about women who are doing exactly what Michelle has done and made a mid-career pivot, and making your workplace more open to hiring people from those diverse, not just diverse backgrounds, but diverse methods of entering the industry.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Eric, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and what do you feel employers can do to support women outside their organisation and wanting to come in, who are wanting to make that transition, maybe that mid-career transition?
Yeah. So it was women coming from outside of their organisation, or people inside the organisation who may want to move into a digital role? I guess because of what I sort of do and in the corporate training space, what I'm passionate about is employers giving opportunities for their current staff, and particularly women, to move from non-digital roles into digital roles. And that's just, I think, especially with coding in specific, it's one of those kind of like, either you can code or you can't code. And so it doesn't have obvious transferable skills. There are, but it's not believed that there are. And so I think there's a lot of reticence from employers to say, okay, we're going to, the term in sort of the industry is redeployment. So we're going to redeploy X number of our current staff. We're going to upskill them through a training program, either in-house, like Developer, or externally, like we would provide, Academy XI, and we're going to give them the skills they need, and then we're going to put them into a full-time digital role with a mentor. But it's hard to do, right? So I mean, like, there's a lot of moving parts that need to take place, that need to sort of go into that redeployment. And, you know, you're not going to see, as an employer, you're not going to see any immediate returns. Some people might drop out of the program, but so there are definite difficulties, but I think the big one is just traditionally employers just haven't been ready conceptually to take that plunge. I think it's starting to change now. So like, it's super exciting to see MYOB have an ongoing program for something like that. But I talk to government and corporate clients all the time who are just starting to kind of toy with this idea or start to put programs in place, but they don't really know where to start a lot of the time. So I would love to see more opportunities inside businesses for women to move into digital roles, because they bring all that knowledge of the business that they already had into the new role. They're super excited There's so many upsides to it, but you just need to have exec buy-in, basically. So that's what I'm passionate about trying to. And so we try to bring the solutions of, it's hard, here's how we would do it, here's how we can help you do it. So that's where I come from on that.
I want to add a couple of things in that. So to the point that what Eric and also Erin had said is that there's always this constant capability of challenging. You know, you're always challenging the status quo no matter what. And if I can put this as an analogy for everyone here, if you kind of look at the universe at the moment, you know, I would say, if we look at it from kind of a bird's eye view, 80% of our architecture, the way homes are built, the way hospitals are built, even the way toilets are built, it's all been built by the mindset of a man. And if we kind of transcend that in the way that we deliver training, in the way that we do our recruitment processes, in the way that we build an environment, predominantly it has been, you know, produced by the male mindset. And this is where, when we say, when are we ready to launch, it's by having those conversations of, does the system, does the platform, does the way we deliver actually provide an impactful, meaningful experience to make it as inclusive as possible. So I love the fact that the idea of constantly challenging everything that you're doing within organizations, within training organizations, is the most critical thing and the most successful thing to kind of look at. So that's one analogy that I would give back to whichever businesses are thinking about, well, how do we really customize something that can provide that inclusivity and diversity of people coming into our organization. Yeah.
Really good point. Erin, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to add to that point that when you're thinking about encouraging the inclusivity and diversity within an organization, I think our tendency is to think about, okay, so when we're hiring for women, we need to do X, Y, Z. Or when we're hiring for these various diverse roles, we need to think about it this way. But it should be, ideally, we should be transforming the way that we think about hiring anybody. That the people who are coming into your organization should all reflect the values that you're wanting to put out there. And so if it is your value to have a more diverse workforce, ideally that becomes a part of your hiring practice for every candidate, rather than hiring women and expecting them to fit in a workplace where diversity is not one of the top values, and inclusivity is not something that people consider in their everyday life.
Yeah, really, really important point. And Chanh, from your experience, like what kind of culture is really required in supporting women into technology roles within an organization? What have you seen be successful?
I think, you know, there's this idea of what was it, if you see it, you can be it. You know, I think there's that huge idea of it. And there's been mentions from Eric about mentoring. There's mentions of Erin mentoring as well. But what we find that has been successful is having mentors that are really closely aligned to your women. And because you look at the state of the population, there is an inequality of the population of women in technology. So you kind of want to bring that to the forefront. And it's not just having women as mentors, it's also having males as mentors as well. There's males that are there to really provide confidence, because I think, you know, we, and Michelle, you can share this as well, but I think we talk a lot at MYOB about imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome runs deep in all of us, regardless of whether you're a woman or whether you're a male, whether you're a junior developer or whether you're a manager of a CEO company. It lives within inside us. And we encourage a culture where, you know, vulnerability is an important part, that stripping away ego is another important part, but also being able to have this culture of we do not just live in the functions of our role, and we do not live in the ivory towers of our department, but we will reach out and we will be ready to offer any help that any individual has. But it's also the other part to that, not undermining the women's capability. Sometimes we hear, some people say, oh, you're, for a woman, you're pretty good at coding. And it's calling people out as quickly as you can, because even if that individual may not mean it, it's having those civil and kind conversations of going, oh, hang on, what you just said there may not have been as, it may not have been effective, but you've got to think about how that kind of displays. So it's having a culture that can call out things really quickly, singe out things really quickly, but having a culture where everyone is open to helping, but also having this humanistic flavor of I'm going to fail, and everybody, I'm going to fail, I'm going to be okay with that. And you're going to have those moments, and we're all going to be okay with that, and that you're actually not alone. So I hope I've reflected that, Michelle. I don't know whether that you've experienced it, but for me, that's what I've seen and what our community has. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to maybe open up to everybody, in what you've seen, I guess. Do digital teams have cultural issues that cause women to steer clear, really? Does anyone want to answer that one?
I'd love
Maybe
to hear Michelle's experience.
Yeah, I think I'm just currently, the graduate program is such that with the developer, I spent basically essentially 1 year of learning. So it was self-paced learning, which has continued to really support foster my love of learning, which has been a great program. And so I'm just currently in my first team rotation. And as Chanh mentioned, there's quite a significant, there's that 40% with females at the moment. And so we have in my team, there's about 3 of us who are females out of 8. And I suppose having, some of those females being developers, that's been really great for me to see. So from my personal experience, it has been pretty positive because of the fact that there are a mixture of both females and males. And also there is a bit of a mix of there's a bit of a cultural mix as well. So I haven't experienced anything but a welcoming sort of environment.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. Definitely. I think that's why these programs are so important, right? It really just helps with that inclusivity. Eric, did you have something you wanted to add to that, or move on to the next question?
Was that Erin or Eric?
Eric, sorry.
I guess my just very briefly, my mom is very strong feminist and sort of instilled that in me, and I've sort of taken that with me my whole life to the best of my abilities, and I'm constantly having to fact check myself on whether I actually am. But I worked in a software development agency a couple of years ago. So there's about 60 full-time developers, and one of them was a woman. And I would talk to the management staff, they were we just can't find any. We want to hire women. And I was I honestly, this is not an answer to a question. It was just, I never could answer the question, do they want to, or what are they doing wrong? How are they unable to bring in female developers? And I never found an answer to it. And it really bothered me. Why, we had women in all the other sort of supporting roles, like marketing and operations and finance, but not in those dev roles. And we just couldn't crack it. So I'm very aware that it is a problem, and so that's why I was keen to participate in this. So it's not a solution; it's just a problem that I've seen, which is maybe a counterpoint to Michelle's experience. But I think it is getting those first, once I think the first steps, the first women. That's because you need to see that it can be done, or you're just going to be well, that's not for me, I guess. Don't know. And there's a number of issues, but getting the first women into the roles, I think, is definitely the hardest part.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, could I say something as well? Yeah, so I think I was just kind of tying with what Erin was saying before. I think the actual problem, and I think what Chanh said as well, is that I think the problem kind of goes before that, and it's basically, that a lot of women don't know that such an opportunity like this exists. So that was to do with my own experience, in schools that I attended and universities, I just never had that exposure to coding. And I think that making it possible to females that you can have a career in tech, and a very meaningful career as well, it's really important for women to be at least exposed to this idea so that they can then assess if this is something that they want to pursue.
Agreed. Totally agree, Michelle. And I think it's about when we're considering that leaky pipeline, we will hopefully build a future where that education and change of attitudes is happening earlier in life. But if we want to make a change now, we have to deal with the situation that we're currently in. And so women of the generations who are currently out there working didn't have that upbringing with STEM as an opportunity as it is for men. And the same and more so goes for non-binary people or women of color. So I think that what we need to be thinking about is how now, well, like that question, Eric, of your former employer saying, where are the women? I want to hire them, but where are they? It's about a shift in the way that we consider the applications, consider the hiring process, because if people go to the exact same places that they would go to look for men, they're not going to find women there. And so it's programs like Develop Her and Generation Australia's programs, and it's thinking about capabilities and not traditional marks of a traditional education. We should be thinking about, can this person do the job? So our generation programs have over 50% women graduates coming out of our programs, and it's not the traditional entry method to the industry. But these are fantastic women who absolutely can do the job. So we need employers to kind of broaden their horizons when thinking about how they want to bring people into their teams with a more diverse background.
And to the point, Erin, it's about challenging the mindset, isn't it? You know, how do you broaden your mind as an organization to assess women coming in? But it's also, you know, if you're looking to find those women, it's a long game. You know, there's a huge investment. So when we talk about investment, it's about injecting yourself as an organization early, partnering up with high schools and primary schools and universities, and having that brand in front of those children to kind of go, oh, you know, I remember when I was in grade 6 and I did this whole, you know, Raspberry Pi thing. And what was that organization? Oh, Generation Australia. So I think that's the biggest thing, that it is a long strategy. And the more you invest in it, the more you're going to grow that population.
Yeah, definitely. Erin, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing at Generation Australia and how you're helping fill that gap.
Yeah, thanks, Christie. So Generation Australia, where our mission is to transform education to employment systems and really challenge the way that people think about hiring. So our programs are completely free, and they target people who are struggling to find employment or underemployed. And basically we take a holistic view of that person and what barriers they're facing to getting into the workforce. We do intensive boot camp like training that not only provides technical skills, but it provides those life skills, the behavioral and mindset skills that set someone up for success across their entire career. And alongside that, we provide one-on-one mentoring, as well as a growing alumni community to help support people, not just to get the role, but once they're actually in the role itself. And it's, as an organization, we're incredibly passionate about getting people to rethink the way that they are approaching their hiring and start to consider people coming in from more diverse backgrounds. So we currently have a junior web developer program running, and where applications are open for that one right now. So if anyone out there is watching and they'd love to get into web development, please head to our website. But we also do programs in disability support and outside the tech sector as well, with the goal of really launching careers in sectors that are recession proof, COVID proof, and can help people have long-term meaningful careers.
Yeah, and it's so important right now. I guess a lot of people also laid off from COVID, etc. And you know, I think it's a really important topic right now, is helping more people into those roles. And in terms of skills development, Eric, this question is for you. You know, other than coding, what skills would be great for women who want to step into technical roles, and what have you seen?
Yeah, so Academy XI, like we teach like user experience design, product management, digital marketing, customer experience. So these are all digital roles that don't require coding skills, basically. So it is a big leap to jump straight into coding. Like we teach software engineering as well. Like we work with Generation to deliver those programs. So that's definitely an option, a direction you can go. But there are, I talk a lot about transferable skills. So yeah, one of those difficulties I mentioned earlier is with coding is that there aren't that many directly transferable skills. You kind of do need to start from scratch a little bit, not completely, but with things like user experience design, where you're designing the architecture and design of a website, or product management, where you're sort of deciding or managing how a digital product is built. You can bring skills that you had previously from other areas like finance or marketing, whatever you did. I mean, digital marketing is an obvious one. Like we teach a lot of, it's sideways moves is the big thing that we are all about. So like most of the people I would say that go through our public streams are graphic designers who want to become user experience designers. They were in operations, they want to become data analysts. They've got got hit by that spark, and they see an opportunity in a space, and there's a gap between what they know and what they want to be doing. And so we're sort of the filler of that gap. So there's a lot of, like probably the majority really, like quality assurance, there's tons and tons of non-coding digital roles that are still quite senior. You get to build really exciting products, and you don't necessarily have to go down that coding route. So yeah, I definitely recommend anyone who's thinking about this, but the coding is maybe a little bit like, well, okay, because it's like that for me. There are a ton of other directions that you can go, and you can use the skills you already have to get there.
I've definitely seen that myself through Tech Ready Women, just getting that initial interest into the space. And I guess it's like what you did, Michelle, too. It's like you start dabbling into different things, and then it sort of leads you right down into deep diving into a specialty or into a skill set that you really end up loving. Michelle, what did you really benefit from doing the developer program?
Yeah, that's, I think there were so many benefits actually. So I think because I was just really fortunate to realize I really liked tech, but it did actually, to be honest, it was it was a bit of a transition, I have to say, but I think that having this program there was really beneficial. So I think I'm just going to quickly summarize, I guess, the top few that I had, which were, I think, firstly, doing this program really was beneficial for me to really just continue fostering my love of learning. So there's a huge emphasis on learning and furthering one's skills. And through this program, they enrolled me into a 6-month boot camp, a coding boot camp, where I did learn the skills to really code and not just use Scratch and drag and drop blocks of code. So this is where I learned, what functions are, how to write coding tests, and how to even deploy basic web apps. So as a result of all this focused learning, I felt like I was ready to join the graduate program at the end of this 6 months. And then, and this graduate program has just continued to foster that love of learning as well. Another great benefit of this program has been and I think Chanh has mentioned this as well, like there's a lot of the mentors. So I felt very well supported all throughout this program. So as I was studying, I was actually assigned a mentor for my well-being, who would check in regularly, encourage me, have phone calls, coffee catch-ups. They'd come into the city, or I'd go into the MYOB offices for that as well. And then I also had another mentor who we'd catch up with regularly as well, who had the technical skills. So where if I encountered any difficulties, which there were definitely some, they would be happy to basically help out with that. And so they both regularly touch base with me, encourage me, and I felt that I could approach them for anything. And then another benefit definitely has been in terms of, which has been a great help, has been the financial support. So I think it's really important to remember that making any sort of career change, whatever that is, like going to coding or maybe you become a teacher or whatever it is, there's some sacrifices in terms of, you make some sort of sacrifice in terms of financial stability and a general sense of predictability, because I guess you're quite used to what you're used to doing. So it definitely helped that I was financially supported throughout whilst learning and doing the boot camp, and this made the career change smoother. So yeah, so basically I felt that MYOB definitely had this really great holistic approach in supporting me intellectually, emotionally, and financially, and that made this career change quite smooth.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I want to ask Chanh a question in just a second around how organizations can implement programs like Develop Her. But first, before that, I want to ask Erin, just from you speaking to your own graduates, women in your program, what benefits have you seen, for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the most wonderful benefits is just seeing someone be able to achieve something that they didn't previously think they were capable of. And, as a woman who grew up thinking I was bad at maths, it's wonderful to see those stereotypes being challenged both externally but also internally as well. It's also wonderful to see people have that that strength and resilience to be able to do something that is new, especially for those who are doing it maybe mid-career and having to make that switch like Michelle did, from what they've known up until this point, and having that bravery to go out there and change to something new. I think especially over the last year, we launched our junior web developer program in the middle of COVID, and it was quite an intense time, and there are a lot of people who had come from other industries. We had multiple people coming from the airline industry who were found themselves in a place where they had to demonstrate that resilience and that willingness to launch into a new career. And I guess from here, it's just about the industry welcoming them with open arms to be able to see them succeed continually into the future.
Yeah, really important. Thanks. And Chanh, yeah, how can organizations, implement programs like Develop Her or start to really attract more women into tech roles in their organization?
Yeah, look, I think there's a real benefit to partnering up with organisations like Generation Australia and Academy XI, just because they have the pool, they have the pool of these women, but it's also kind of partnering up with these training organisations to kind of go, okay, so how do we really unpack and embed and build a program that is not only going to attract women, but also going to retain them, inside the organisation. And, these people have the expertise in being able to provide that. The journey that we had come to at MYOB was that we launched Develop Her back in 2016, and it wasn't great. I'm going to say that. And the reason why I want to call that out is that you're not going to get it perfect the first time or the second time, but the most important thing is that you're constantly learning. You're constantly learning about how do you make environments inclusive, and there's going to be moments where you're going to make mistakes, and that is okay. It's about overcoming those learnings and mistakes even further. But the biggest thing is that for us, it was more so around putting ourselves inside the mind of someone who might be changing their careers, someone who is taking on that bravery. Erin said there's a lot of bravery towards changing your discipline. The confidence levels needs to kind of be brought up. So how do we embed components that can help bring up confidence, and help us so that woman or that person it represents diversity feels completely inclusive. And we would say that our program is high risk. And the reason why it's high risk is that we offer a salary for our developers while they are learning at a training organisation. We also pay for their fees in terms of scholarships as well, in the hope that at the end they do become software developers. And that is high risk because there's no guarantee of what the commitment look like. But I think that's, as an organisation, you have to accept that, is this a risk that we're willing to take as well? So kind of, having those conversations is really important, and also bringing in support that can really enable women to be attracted, but also to stay in technology as well. So I guess there's twofold. If you do have a lot of money, it's great in terms of being able to build a program. But if you don't, it's still okay, because every single little bit actually matters. And that's where I say, engage and partner with your training organizations, engage with yourself. Christie, you come from this amazing organization where you've supported women, doing your research and really having these case studies and understanding, well, what do they actually really need? And looking at from, we don't have to throw money, and we don't have to sing it on the top of, rooftops that we're recruiting women, but it is really about putting something that's meaningful. And once you are embedded inside the community as an organization, and you're understanding the problems and you're understanding what women need, then you can actually start unpacking, a structure within the organization to support that. So I guess the overall message that I say is, be connected to the community and those who have the information and the expertise to help you build that program, because you can leverage so much of it that whether or not you have the money or whether you do, it's a powerful way to embed that practice, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I love that. I'm just looking at the time. I want to open it up to our attendees to type away any questions that you have for our panelists, or for this, or that any comments that you want to add to the discussion. I think there's also a Q&A box if you want to pop it in there as well. So feel free to ask questions. I think we've got another 10 or so minutes to go. But for any of our panelists, while we're waiting to see, oh, we got a question. Hold on. I was jumping ahead. Okay, so William says, thanks for this very valuable and informative webinar. It sounds like management and recruitment are very supportive of a diverse and inclusive workplace. I'm wondering how this is received by other levels of the organization, and whether there's underlying resentment or backlash from others, and how to navigate that. Great question. Who would like to answer that?
I think that's a really important question, and I think that's what I was sort of alluding to when saying that there's so many organizations out there now who have that great intention, and that intention might be coming from management or HR, but it could also be coming from the individuals in the team as well. But when faced with the reality of just the status quo changing, it can be difficult. And I think that's where what I mentioned before around diversity and inclusion being a part of everything you do as an organization is incredibly important to things like the diversity within the people that you're hiring. So if a HR team or management are interested in attracting more women in their tech roles, also, running diversity and inclusion workshops with the entire team, and not just making it about women, making it about all the different wonderful differences that make everyone in the team unique and human and who they are, and accepting those, because I'm sure even if you have a team that's entirely men, they're not all going to be the exact same human. And so once we start to view ourselves as humans who are all different, and we can encourage those and back that up with real policy and procedure and education within the workplace, then I think that's where you see the most benefits of the flow-on effect. But you know, for people who are more interested in hearing it from a more quantitative kind of perspective, there are a lot of stats out there to back up why diversity is better, how it makes teams more productive and efficient and innovative. So you can always take that angle as well, I think.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Erin. I really love that. I'd like to add to that as well for you, William, is that there is actually a business commercial benefit to this. So if you think about building software, alone, the customers that are interacting with that software is basically a diverse range of people. Now, if you only have one dimension of diversity building software, you're only going to reach that percentage of people of using that software, if that makes sense. But when you have a representation of people building that software, then you're going to build really amazing products. You're going to have more people attached to that product because it's speaking towards each and every individual that comes from all different types of backgrounds. So there is a commercial business value to this, and that is the more people that represent building the software means the better the products will be. So that's one way of being able to navigate that.
Chanh, sorry, Chanh, just an example of that. There's a wonderful book, I can't remember the title of it now, but around data and the design of systems with women. And the example, although it's a non-tech example, is the way that seatbelts are designed. They're designed for men's bodies, and women overwhelmingly are injured in car crashes by the seatbelt because, you know, it's a world that's designed for men by men, and that flows over into tech, just like you're saying there.
Perfect example. I'm going to get that book off you, actually. That's a really good example. Love it.
Okay, so Leola, what advice would you give to women who are fearful of stepping into a career in tech and still see it as a male-dominated space?
Sure, I might give some advice there because I feel like I've kind of done this. So I think one really important thing, I think one great thing about being based, I'm not sure where you're based, Leola, or where most of the people are based, but like being based, but I do know that in Australia, there's a lot of like different meetups and coding meetups, and also a lot of workshops specifically targeted to women and those that identify as females. So I will definitely advise, like, you know, joining those, and all of those are actually free. And I attended so many of those before I suppose I thought that coding could become like a reality in terms of a career. And I think doing things like that, because I was just simply interested in coding, and it was really also a good opportunity for me to see if this is actually something enjoyable for me to do as a career. So I think stepping into those meetups, there's a lot of women specific ones, but also there's ones which are just general topics. And I don't necessarily think you have to have a tech background to go to a lot of these meetups. There's junior developer meetups, women who code meetups. Yeah, as I was mentioning, the Muses JavaScript meetups, and then they were great. Then I also listen to a lot of podcasts. There's podcasts out there where I was listening to a podcast where a person made a career change from a glass blower to a developer, and I think it was like a lawyer to developer. So hearing about all these different stories as well, I think that really just gave me some hope that that was definitely possible. So yeah, I'd encourage doing things like that.
Great advice, thank you. Sarosh, so for organizations looking to put into place best practices, hold on, I've just lost it, sorry. For organizations wanting to put in place best practices around hiring and retaining women in technical roles, are there particular resources you'd recommend reading or absorbing to ensure we're avoiding common pitfalls and putting in the right policies in every part of our organization?
That's a wonderful question. I mean, Generation is happy to have a chat about this in more detail. So happy to take this discussion offline as well. But Diversity Council of Australia is I think a great place to start in terms of building your diversity and inclusion policies, and they have a wealth of information that is relevant to the Australian context as well. And I think as well, seeking out other organizations that you think are doing this well and asking for them to share advice and speak to you about the way that they've approached it. So I think there's both the perspective of getting resources and absorbing those, but also understanding from the perspective of people who have gone through it as well.
Thank you. So Elsa would like to ask a question from Michelle. I was working in an accounting practice and trying to move into tech industry, but I'm that kind of woman who are not good at computers, not sure where to start, thinking about learning coding first and then where it will take me. What's your advice?
Yeah, that's a good question, Elsa. I think it kind of relates a bit to the previous question, but I think probably, yeah, you said you're not good at computers, but I would like to probably counter that with the fact that I think coding actually, like most things in life, actually can be taught. So, and that comes from my own experience. As you know, I had no coding background. I didn't code a lot. I didn't write a line of code until I was well into my 20s. So yes, so I definitely think it can be taught. And I would advise to definitely look into doing some basic coding workshops, as I previously mentioned, going to some meetups. I first started to learn to code after scratch by using free code camp and also watching some Udemy videos on making an HTML and CSS website. So I definitely think we're really lucky in this time, this age where this era where we can basically have anything. If we want to learn something, you have that at your fingertips.
Great. And we've got just 4 minutes left. So quickly, last two questions from Sam. He is starting with a course with Academy XI next week, which is great. He's got a STEM background in biological sciences, but struggling with imposter syndrome and making the move to a career in tech. Do you have any suggestions or experience to share how to overcome this?
Maybe I can jump on that one since you're joining us next week. I'm excited to have you. I mean, to start off with, if you've got a background in biological sciences, you're going to be just fine. UX UI is one of those subjects. It's the core subject that we teach. It's what we've taught the longest, and it is very intuitive. It's all just sort of lending process and structure to things that you already would have thought were obvious. So, for example, if we're going to build a website, we should probably go out and talk to the people who are going to be using the website. Okay, how do we go about doing that? Now, how do we take those insights that we pull from those conversations and use them to build products? I mean, these are all things you would just be like, well, that's obvious. I think just that overall is just try to, I mean, it's easy to say, I have imposter syndrome all the time, and I've worked at XI for 2 years. There's always just elevating levels of imposter syndrome. For me, it's that I can't code. It's always going to be there. There'll be something. So just use your curiosity to your advantage, learn what you can, and just bring in, use the skills you already have and just come in with an open mind and try to have fun, answer questions for yourself. And then at the beginning, don't worry about what's going to be demanded of you. Just try and take away as much information as you can. That would be my advice.
Sorry, I was on mute. Good advice there. Thanks, Eric. Last question quickly before we wrap up. What makes a Protege developer successful in the role? What should they bring to MYOB to be successful? And what qualities, like tech, soft skills, that you look for during interviews? I guess this is for you, Chanh.
Yeah, so we're going to go out to market for some Protege developers in the middle of April. So if you are interested, please apply. But what do we look for? We don't really look at code as much in terms of the application, but we do want to see projects that you have worked on, anything that's kind of, extra curriculum to the passion of software development. But what we do look for is your ability to be resilient, that you have a passion for learning, that you demonstrate ways on how to navigate the unknown. Those are the areas that we look at. We also look at your capability of problem solving and your abstract thinking. So those are some of the things that we also look at, and also being able to know that you're a good human and be able to work in different types of teams and communicate well. So those are the qualities. So if you are interested, apply. There are about 4 stages to the interview. interview process. The first is an application of a video, answering some questions to some of the cultural values that we value at MYOB, and also a problem-solving interview. So we call it a systems interview that Michelle went through, unpacking the way that you abstractively think, and then we put you through kind of a cognitive test, and then hopefully an offer at the end. So that's basically our program there. So yeah.
Great, thanks so much. And I will wrap our great discussion up here now. Wonderful to have all of our panelists today to discuss this really important topic. And I think we can all say, yes, there's barriers, there has been major barriers, but there are so many amazing solutions and avenues for women to make their way into tech roles, and for organizations wanting to bring on more women into tech roles and more diverse roles as well. So I think big thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights today. It's been wonderful to chat with you all. Obviously, everyone who joined us, thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Eric, Erin and Chanh if you have any questions about Academy XI, Generation Australia or MYOB Developer Program. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, team. Bye.
Bye.